Topic 7.9, phylogeny. To help you study, I've put together a checklist that you can download at apbiosuccess.com/checklist. What is phylogeny? What is a phylogenetic tree? How are such trees built? Phylogeny means evolutionary history. A phylogenetic tree, also known as an evolutionary tree, is a branching diagram that shows evolutionary relationships. And phylogenetic trees are built using morphological, that means structural, molecular, or genetic evidence. This is a phylogenetic tree. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that it is a claim that's based on evidence. So the claim here is that hippos and whales are more closely related to one another than whales are to deer. Why is that? Because based on the evidence, which would be morphological, molecular, genetic, hippos and whales have a more recent common ancestor than either does with deer. We'll see the details in the subsequent slides. Are you asking yourself, how am I going to get a 4 or a 5 on the AP Bio exam? It's a good question because it's a hard test, but we have a plan for your success. Go to learn-biology.com, sign up for a free trial, and complete our interactive tutorials and interactive AP Bio exam reviews. We guarantee you a 4 or a 5 on the AP Bio exam. See you on learn-biology.com. Define the term clade. Clade is an incredibly important biology term that's not known to the general public, but now you'll know it and you'll be able to explain it to people. A clade is a group of organisms that consists of a common ancestor and all of that ancestor's descendants. In this diagram, all of the species and all of the numbered groups are clades. So, down here, the large ground finch, that's a seed-eating finch in the Galapagos Islands, that's a clade. All members of a species have a common ancestor. All humans have a common ancestor. All human beings are a clade. The large ground finch and the common cactus finch have a common ancestor. That's this over here at E. So those two species together constitute a clade. If you go back in time, because there's implied time in any phylogenetic tree, then all of these 4 species, the woodpecker finch, the small tree finch, the common cactus finch, and the large ground finch, they comprise a clade. That's group number 5 over here. Their common ancestor is this species that's over here at C. Define shared derived character. A shared derived character is a trait that identifies, that distinguishes a clade, and it evolved in the common ancestor of that clade, and it sets it apart from other such clades. So, for example, lungs and 4 limbs separate this clade, all of these organisms that are classified as frogs, lizards, alligators, robins, rats, and gorillas. That constitutes a clade, and they all have this shared derived character. Going back in time, the shared derived feature vertebral column separates this clade that includes all the salmon through gorilla. Fur and mammary glands separates the clade that includes rats and gorillas from all the other organisms. These are mammals, and those are shared derived features of mammals. What are nodes and sister groups? A node is where 2 branches in a phylogenetic tree diverge, and nodes represent the common ancestor of the 2 diverging lineages. So at left, letters A through E, those are all nodes. Nodes, common ancestor. So over here, there was a common ancestor that led to the divergence between this clade over here and this species over here, the green warbler finch, which is not part of the clade. That includes all of these organisms that have a common ancestor at B. Sister groups are the descendants that split apart from the same node, such as the common cactus finch over here and the large ground finch. Those can also be called sister species because that's the taxonomic level at which they're at. So the woodpecker finch, the small tree finch, that clade, that's a sister clade to this clade that's defined by letter E, the common cactus finch and the large ground finch. Your success in AP Biology starts here. Are you struggling with AP Bio? With learn-biology.com, students get the skills and confidence to be a top student and earn 4s and 5s on the AP Bio exam, guaranteed. Go to learn-biology.com to find out how you can master your biology course and crush the AP Bio exam. What is an outgroup? An outgroup is a more distantly related group of organisms that's used to determine the evolutionary relationships among the other organisms in the tree, which is the in-group. In this phylogenetic tree, A is the outgroup for this clade that's over here at number 2. It's a point of comparison for the in-group, and it's a species or it's some other taxonomic category that's not part of the clade to which all the other organisms in the phylogenetic tree belong. What's the biggest mistake to avoid in phylogenetic analysis? The misconception that many students naively have is that vertical closeness on a horizontal tree indicates evolutionary closeness, but it doesn't. For example, the frog and the lizard, they're next to one another, but they're not particularly closely related. The only thing that matters on a phylogenetic tree in terms of evolutionary relatedness is the recency of common ancestry. So alligators and robins, they have their common ancestor over here. Rats and gorillas, they have their common ancestor over here. Frogs are right next to lizards, but their common ancestor, the common ancestor of the frog and the lizard, is all the way back here. And the basic idea is that nodes can rotate. So this phylogenetic tree over here is correctly drawn. It's exactly equivalent to this one over here, but you can see that in this one, the lizard is no longer next to the frog. Right? So here's the lizard down here, here's the frog over here, and here's the lizard over here, and here's the frog over here. It's just about rotation. And if you think about the art form called a mobile, mobiles all rotate. It's a kind of kinetic sculpture. And if you can think of phylogenetic trees as one instantiation of a kinetic sculpture, you'll have the right idea about this. Always look for recency of common ancestry when you're trying to figure out the evolutionary relationships described by a phylogenetic tree. Define ancestral feature. An ancestral feature is a trait that members of a clade share, but which is also shared by larger, more inclusive clades. It doesn't define the clade. So for clade G, which includes rats and gorillas, that's the mammal clade, an ancestral feature would be claws or nails. And why is that? Because mammals, they do have that trait, but it's also found in this larger, more inclusive clade that runs from lizards down to gorillas over here. Lungs and forelimbs is another ancestral trait of rats and gorillas, this mammal clade. It doesn't define the clade, but everyone in the clade has to have that because there's a larger, more inclusive clade that has that feature. I'm Mr. W from learn-biology.com, where we believe that interaction and feedback is what leads to deep, substantial learning. We're so sure of that we provide a money-back guarantee that comes with your subscription. What type of evidence is typically used to construct phylogenetic trees of existing species? Before the 1960s, morphological similarities was what biologists used to determine who was more closely related to whom and thereby construct phylogenetic trees. But more recently, post-1960, remember Watson and Crick figured out the structure of DNA in 1953. Nucleotide sequences in DNA and RNA and amino acid sequences in proteins have become the gold standard in determining phylogenetic relationships. So a DNA analysis would indicate that the common cactus finch is more closely related to the large ground finch than to any of the other Galapagos species. That's a hypothesis, and you could confirm that through DNA sequencing. What are molecular clocks? Here's how this works. For any specific protein or nucleic acid, the rate of change that's caused by accumulated mutations is constant over time. And if you can calibrate the amount of change in a gene or protein to when species split apart, which you can sometimes determine from the fossil record, then you can do two things. One is you can determine a rate of change in that gene or protein, and you can use that rate to determine when other species split apart. What this graph says is it's looking at hemoglobin as a molecular clock. Based on some fossil evidence, it's basically saying that 20 mutations accumulate every 100 million years. So therefore, if you're looking at the hemoglobin between two species and you notice 40 amino acid substitutions, then you could infer that that occurred more like 250 30 million years ago. This is widely used in evolutionary biology. It's the basis for claims that, for example, humans and chimpanzees had a common ancestor about 6 million or so years ago, based on the similarity of DNA between us and chimps. Here are your next moves for AP Bio success. Please subscribe to learn-biology.com and please watch this next video.